So our topic here is assessment purposes, learning targets, and appropriate methods. So what are your expected outcomes for this lesson? For you to identify and describe the different purposes of assessment. In fact, we've already touched on that on our previous topics. No? This will just be a reinforcement. And then formulate learning targets for specific lessons. In other words, we will be able to formulate before we refer to them as objectives. Right now, you refer to them as outcomes and more specifically, learning targets. And then hopefully you'll be able to match appropriate assessment method with specific learning targets. So if you can recall in your outcomes-based education, what we first set is the outcomes. Once we have determined the outcomes, that will be the time that we will be able to determine if how will we be teaching our students, that is instruction, and how will we assess the learning of our students. And that is what we are learning in this subject, your assessment. Okay, so hopefully we will be able to attain that at the end of this subject. Now, what is the purpose of classroom assessment? I have emphasized to you last time that there are three major types of assessment. Assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. Now, just for the purpose of easy recall, when I say assessment for learning, what's another term for that? When I say assessment for learning, anong another term natin dyan?
Formative assessment, sir.
Okay, very good, no? So plus the Q there is for. So for learning, it's your formative assessment. Okay? Now, another type of learning is your assessment of learning. So assessment of learning, another term for that is? Another term for that is? Yes. Ella?
Summative, sir.
Okay, that would be your summative assessment. And then plus when I say assessment as learning, what's another term for that? Also starts with letter A.
Authentic, sir.
You have your authentic assessment. Okay? So class, if you would look at these three types of assessment, they also are the same purpose of assessment. So pwedeng assessment natin is of learning, for learning, and as learning. Okay, so summative, formative, and authentic. Now, let's recall, no? Let's just try to recall what are the different types or what is the different types of assessment. Okay, let's try to discuss the concepts there. So let's talk about your assessment of learning. Let's just recap what is assessment of learning. So class, when I talk about assessment of learning, as you have mentioned, it is summative. And when I say summative, when is it carried out? When is it carried out? At the start of the program, during the course, or at the end of the course?
End of the discussion, sir.
Okay, so it's carried out at the end of the discussion or at the end of a specific unit as long as sa end siya. So class, when we talk about this type of assessment, as long as we talk about assessment of learning, it assesses class the learned or acquired knowledge. It talks about the learned or acquired knowledge and skills. So kung titingnan nyo, the word there is learned and acquired, meaning past tense na. Meaning at the end of the course siya natin carry out. Also class, your assessment of learning is used to assess whether the learners were able to achieve. So it also assesses achievement of curriculum outcomes. So class, pag sinabi kong curriculum outcomes, di ba sa katapusan na yan usually ng subject or sa katapusan na mismo class ng isang year level kung saan enrolled yung students natin. That's your assessment of learning. Now class, pag sinabi ko naman na assessment for learning, so class, as you have mentioned earlier, that is formative. So again, it is used to identify the needs of your learners in order to modify instruction. Meaning class, this happens during instruction. While you are still teaching your students, you are asking them questions for you to determine whether they find out or they understood the topic that you are discussing or not. Okay, if they are unable to understand the topic that you are discussing, okay, so class, pag they are unable to understand the topic that they are discussing, you need to modify your discussion. And again, it is meant to identify gaps in the learning experiences so that they can be assisted in achieving the outcomes. Then class, assessment as learning. Ano naman po isang goal ng assessment as learning dito? Class, makikita natin that it helps your learners to become self-regulated. Perhaps the more common term that we can encounter is that it says we help learners to become self-directed learners. So we have what we refer to as your self-directed learning. If titingnan siya natin, your authentic type of assessment, your Assessment as learning, another term for that is authentic type of assessment. Plus, it's also formative in nature. Di ba? Kasi minsan pag titingnan niyo yung reference, dinidifferentiate lang siya as either formative and saka summative. So if I would look at authentic assessment, it's also formative in nature. And then plus its inclination is to look into real life examples or real life applications of the lessons that you are teaching the students. It is meant to use your task, your results, and feedback to help learners practice self-regulation and achieve curriculum outcomes. Another keyword here, future teachers, that you need to look into is the term feedback. Pag sinabi po nating feedback, by the time po that you have the requirements of your students, you don't just settle on checking the requirements, you don't just settle on giving grades to your students. If you would want class the assessment to be effective, you should give feedback to your students. And by feedback, we meant that you need to give verbal feedback to your students. You need also to be able to give class an actual feedback that could be applied in real life situations. And yan po ang main point ng authentic assessment natin. Okay? So halimbawa, pag nagkamali po yung isang learner natin, ano po yung sasabihin natin? We don't right away tell them that mali ka, or we do not actually tell them na you committed something wrong. Instead, class, you ask them the question, what went wrong? So that they will be able to realize, yun nga pala yung reason kung bakit ako nagkamali. Pagkatapos, class, once they have identified what went wrong, you try to ask them again. No? What can you do to improve your learning on the next time? Okay? What will you do, class, to improve your learning on the next time? Okay? So, yan po yung isipin natin. So, class, pag titingnan po natin, ang main purpose po ng sinasabi natin na authentic assessment is real-life applications. Okay? So, that is your assessment as learned. Now, what is your basis for alignment of assessment? Diba, we are talking about, sige, magbigay ako ng quiz, magbigay ako ng activity, magpa-role play tayo. There are a lot of assessments. And even right now, if you are very resourceful, you can actually look at the web, look at the internet. Napakaraming way to assess. Mag-type ka lang dyan. Assessment for MAPE, assessment for English class, assessment for Filipino class. The internet will be giving you a lot of options on how to do it. Pero class, what will be your basis for the alignment of assessment? Because take note, you can't have all of them in a single subject. You can't have all of them in a single topic. So what would you do, no? Class, you need to understand these three things as the basis for your alignment in assessment. Number one, what will be taught? Ano nga ba yung ituturo mo for this subject? That refers to your curriculum contents, the competency that needs to be gained, and then the performance standards. If in the college class, no, you would look at this on the CHED memorandum order. So if you are referring to elementary and secondary education, you might need to look into the regulations posted by the Department of Education. Pagkatapos, how will it be taught? Ituturo nga ba ito face-to-face? Ituturo nga ba ito online? Ituturo nga ba ito hybrid? Plus, the type of instruction that will be done could also affect the type of assessment that you will be doing. For example, pag nagtuturo ako ng basketball, di class pag face-to-face siya, I will know that I need my students to do basketball and that they need to play basketball. That's face-to-face assessment. Pero if I will be doing it, if you have done it online, like the last years, anong ginagawa? Ipinapademo kung paano mag-dribble, what are the different types of dribbling, paano po nga ba na kapag tumatakbo habang hawak yung bola, you just do the video demonstration. So that's why your instruction class is important also to determine the assessment. And then class, what do we want from the very start? And that want from the very start is what we refer to as your outcomes. No? Halimbawa, for your teacher education like yours, what's our goal? At the end of the program, you will be able to become effective teachers that uses the values of a Christian, okay, your Excel, no? Tsaka yung values na tinuturo namin sa inyo. So if that's the outcome that we would want, that's also the basis of everything that we will be teaching in this curriculum. Now, So in the classroom, again, the purpose plus of assessment is assessment of learning, for learning, and as learning. So now, may iba't iba naman tayong uri ng learning when it comes to when it comes to may term sila, may term tong ginagamit si Balagtas. They classify learning. Allow me to retrieve the term. So, yung tatlong ito, this is the purpose of classroom learning. No? So, that's the purpose of classroom learning. But then, there's another term that refers to a separate set of the types of learning. Sorry, I'm still retrieving the term. Okay, so class, you call this as the roles of assessment. So class, there are different roles of assessment in the classroom setting. So class, pag titingnan ko yung roles of assessment, okay, may 5 po tayong roles ng assessment. One class is your formative. Another one is your diagnostic. Another one is your evaluative. And then another one is facilitative. And then motivational. No need for you to write one by one. It will be there on the succeeding slides. Now, when I talk about formative, just like what we have discussed, its purpose plus is to acquire the current status of knowledge, to gather information even before instruction, to plan better, and then allow to modify instruction. It's just like your formative assessment. Now, diagnostic class. Ang diagnostic, pag sinabi nating class na diagnostic, it is used to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of the learner. Look at the term class ha, it is used to identify the strength and the weaknesses of the learner. So, it is used to focus on the specific learning needs and opportunities for instructional intervention, which could be inside or outside the classroom. Usually, class, we use your diagnostic test among your students who have learning difficulties. Among your students, class, na may learning difficulties. Sino po sila? Sila po yung patient nyo, sila po yung students natin na may dyslexia, sila po yung students natin that are unable to talk, sila po yung students natin na may special needs, no? So, kasi in the classroom, being a teacher, don't expect right away that you will be able to see them. Oftentimes, late nyo na siya nakikita eh. For example, may isa kang student na parang ang restless sa classroom. Akala mo talagang restless lang siya. Ayun pala class, may ADHD siya. So to identify the learning disability of your students, you need to be able to carry out a diagnostic test. And again, as I have mentioned, the diagnostic test could be carried out in the classroom, but oftentimes in our setting, it's actually carried out in the guidance counselor's office, or if hindi po siya sa guidance counselor's office, pwede po siya nating i-refer sa psychometrician, psychologist, or even your psychiatrist. No? So class, napakarami ng learning disabilities. Kung titingnan niyo po, merong dyscalculia, kaya in other words, they are having difficulty with math, may dysgraphia, hindi po sila makapagsulat ng maayos, may dyslexia, hindi sila makapagbasa, at saka hindi po sila makapag-speak well, and there are a lot of learning disabilities. So as a teacher, pag nakikita niyo po na may poor performer kayo sa classroom, isang titingnan nyo is to administer diagnostic assessment. Because later on, class, the goal of that diagnostic assessment is to have differentiated or individualized learning plan. Kung kaya nga, di ba, may school tayo para sa mga children with special needs. Okay? That's it. Now, you have your evaluative. Your evaluative is, if I will attach this to a type of assessment that we have discussed. Anong type ng assessment yung evaluative? Anybody? What type of assessment is considered to be evaluative? Is it formative? Is it summative? Or is it authentic?
Summative, sir.
Okay, actually class, no? Babalik din naman to sa summative assessment. So pag titingnan ninyo, look at the words, learner's performance or achievement. Okay? Making judgment or grading. So class, it's referring to summative assessment. It gives information whether we have met intended learning outcomes. In other words, class, this is done at the end of instruction. And this could be the basis for placement or promotion to the next educational level. Di ba class, kadalasan sinasabi, dapat ma-reach mong ganitong cut-off before ka ma-promote to the next level. And the purpose of that class is to determine whether the child is indeed capable of being promoted to the next level or hindi pa. Okay? Next, facilitative. As the term implies, it facilitates. Now, it facilitates. So class, it is the use of assessment to improve instruction and the learning experiences also of your learners. Okay? So, parang babalik siya class sa formative and then also babalik siya class sa authentic. Okay? Now, it allows monitoring, evaluation, and improvement of own learning strategies. Yan po yung purpose ng isang facilitative assessment. So, halimbawa, in an online instruction class, no, pwede akong magbigay sa inyo ng quiz with multiple attempts. Okay? Halimbawa, may tayo. Let's say, for example, yung subject natin, chemistry. Pinapamemorize ko kayo ng chemical formula ng mga radicals. So, you have your bicarbonate, you have your sulfate, okay? Okay, you have your, napakarami yan, di ba? May mga permanganate, for example. Pinapamemorize ko yan sa inyo. Tapos may online quiz akong ginawa. Ang online quiz ko matching type, pero plus multiple attempts kayo. Ano pong ibig sabihin ng multiple attempts? Pwede nyo i-take ang exam many times as I have set it. For example, I will set it that you can take it 10 times. Okay? Pwedeng ganon. That's also a form of assessment. And in fact, that is assessment as learning. Bakit po siya naging assessment as learning? No? Paano po siya naging assessment as learning? I'm allowing the student to take the exam first, tapos pag na-realize nyo, wow, 5 lang ako out of 20, kulang pa yung memorization ko. So ano pong gagawin ng student? Mag-aaral, tapos take the exam again. Mag-aaral, and then take another exam again, hanggang sa ma-perfect niya po yung examination. Okay? So yan po class ang tinutukoy natin na assessment as learning. Okay? And that is what we refer to as facilitative type of learning also. So hindi lahat ng quiz class kailangan graded. Pwede kang mag-quiz. Halimbawa, in our class, I can require you to take this quiz and then the highest score will be the one that will be recorded. Di ba? Pag bibigyan ko kayo ng multiple attempts, edi yung tendency is that you will repeat and repeat and repeat until you will be able to get the perfect score. Okay? Or, pwede naman siya na hindi ko i-record ang score, sasabihan ko kayo na, required ito for your attendance for this week. Dapat matapos nyo ito. Okay? That's facilitative type of learning. So, sir, what are we trying to develop here? If I will be doing that, I am trying to develop mastery among my students because they need to memorize these radicals for them later on to understand how a compound is being formed. Okay? So there are types of assessment like that. Pagkatapos class motivation. Pag sinabi nating motivational assessment as one purpose of your assessment, it's a mechanism for your learners to be motivated and engage in the learning process. Now, ano po yung mga motivational examples? Grades. Okay? Maraming namomotivate sa grades. And in fact, your grades kasi actually help because they try to become objective. They try to translate your learning in numerical terms. Mas madali po siyang maintindihan. Alam natin na ang student na 75, medyo mahina yung performance compared mo kay student na ang grade 85. Okay? Now, although as educators, we understand that grades is not the only basis of performance. But our model of education is very inclined on grades still. Next, we also focus on progress. Halimbawa, you are dealing with a grade 3 student. Pagkatapos itong grade 3 student, nahalata mo na parang demotivated. Pagkatapos nahahalata mo parang detached sa klase. Wala siya class na wala siyang engagement with the classmates. One thing class that you can tell the student at the end of the semester is that you can tell the student something like this. You know what, pupil Jose? I have noticed that on the start of the class, medyo mahiyain ka pa. Hindi mo kinakausap yung mga classmates mo. Pero right now, I have already noticed that you are talking to them and that you are playing with them. Okay? Period. That's it. Okay? Now, anong common pitfall na gusto kong i-correct? Class, kadalasan sinasabi natin, oy, Jonaline, very good. Oy, Rachel, very good. Anong very good? Okay? Anong very good? Okay? What part was very good? No? Halimbawa, hindi nakapaligo si Jonaline, tapos sabi ni Jonaline, very good pala ako today kasi hindi ako nakapaligo. Okay? So, what I meant is that, allow me to have this next example. If I will tell Jonaline and Rachel, Jonaline, Rachel, I appreciate that you're turning on your cameras. Right there and then, I told them kung ano yung very good. pagsasabihan nyo lang kasi yung isang bata, yung isang learner na very good, hindi niya alam kung anong very good. Pagkatapos class, halimbawa sinabi mo very good, tapos kinopya niya lang pala yung sagot niya dun sa isa niyang kaklase. So sabi, baka isipin ng bata, uy, very good pala ako kasi nag-cheat ako. But instead, if you tell them, I appreciate that you got high scores. It's good that you were able to get high scores for my math exam. Okay, there, right there and then, you are able to reinforce and motivate them to repeat that behavior. And you are providing what we refer to as your effective feedback. Plus, pag sinabi kong effective feedback, siguro ang isang basic background na pwede nating gamitin dyan is your golden rule. Okay? Do unto others what you would want others will do unto you. Okay? Halimbawa, pangit ka. Gusto mo bang sabihan ka ng iba na, uy, ang pangit mo? Di ba? Hindi. Okay? Pero plus, you will be happy if others will tell you. If your best friend, for example, will tell you, you know what, Marites, kailangan mo sigurong ayusin yung kilay. In the same way, when we are dealing with our students, we give them effective feedback. So we try to be objective as possible. Halimbawa, we say, Jose, you need to improve on the manner that you are talking. Tapos when you are giving effective feedback, my dear fellow teachers of the future, do not focus only on the negative aspect. You need to point out both the positive and the negative. And we do not say na, oh, ito, Jonalyn, ito yung mga mabubuti mong ginawa. Jonalyn, ito naman yung mga masasama mong ginawa. Hindi siya ganon. We don't refer to them as good and bad. We refer to them as good and we refer to this one as areas for improvement. Okay, they are your areas for improvement. So halimbawa, halimbawa, if you have a student, for example, who is unable to deliver in class, okay, parang nanginginig kapag magpaparecite ka, anong sasabihin mo at the end? So sasabihin mo, John, I appreciate what you have done during the discussion. We appreciate that you were able to finish the topic. John, on the succeeding topics that you will be discussing, itry natin na hindi na po tayo dapat nagsastutter. Let's try to discuss it fluently in English. Okay? John, I appreciate your confidence in discussing this topic. So class, kung nakikita nyo, parang na-sandwich po siya. Positive, area to improve, and then another positive. You don't want to end your feedback to your students by making them realize na pangit sila, bobo sila, di nila alam yung ginagawa nila. Okay? You always end on the note that you have done something good, but there are just areas that you need to improve. And then plus, you have your innovating assessment task. So, with the access in the internet, dapat talagang mag-innovate. No? So, marami pong innovation in assessment. For example, here in Zoom, we can apply your polls. No? Pwede po ako mag-apply ng poll. Okay? So, halimbawa, pag marunong po kayo ng polls dito sa Zoom, I'm trying to set it up now pero bumabagal. But anyway, okay, sige, I'm trying to type something. There are a lot na kasi of ways for you to do your assessment. No? Okay? Okay. Ay, naka-inactive yung polling ko. In a while. Kasi daw naka-log in ako sa another device. Okay. Let me pick it up again. Okay, sorry class, it's inactive. No? But anyway, try to search. No? Try to search. Paano nga ba gagawa ng poll? Tapos siguro kung narinig nyo, there are already devices such as your Mentimeter. Your Mentimeter class is a software that allows for live creation of word cloud that will be able class to engage your students. Now, another way, for example, is napakarami eh. Okay, allow me to show to you some innovative ways of doing your assessment. Konti lang, para at least may mga ideas lang kayo kung paano siya gawin. No? Now, you are looking at my screen right now. And then class, one thing siguro na nahahalata ninyo is that dapat class, if you're doing these assessments, no, if you're using your devices for presentations like this one to your students, dapat marunong kayong mag-operate ng technology na ginagamit ninyo. Or else class, papalya kayo, hindi kayo ma-appreciate ng student ninyo. Okay? Now, tingnan natin to. Ha? Halimbawa, plus we are talking about the skeletal system. No? Kasi sa sciences, di ba? Or kahit sa PE nga, nag-discuss tayo ng skeletal system. Okay? Now, for example, I have this image of a skeleton on my screen, and then class, that skeleton is not labeled. Huwag po natin siyang i-label. Okay, halimbawa halimbawa lang, walang label. Okay? That's on the screen. Now guys, for example, if we're having our discussion, can you point out to me where the femur is? Paano niyo ipo-point out sa akin yung femur? Plus, try to look into your Zoom. Tingnan nyo, hanapin nyo yung annotation. Hanapin nyo po yung annotation. Tingnan nyo po yung Zoom. Tapos hanapin po ninyo yung annotation. Sige na. So that you will be able to practice it. Okay? Can you see it there from your end? Hinahanap ko rin dito para we will be able to show. Sige, where is the drawing tools ba? Okay. Try to look at this muna. Because if you would look at that, that's a whiteboard, no? That's a whiteboard. Now try to draw something on the whiteboard. Can I request somebody to draw something on the whiteboard? Sige na, try to explore the annotation. Okay? Yes, yung iba pa. Try nyo. Okay? Now students, no? In the same way, we can actually engage our students. Now, for example, no, if I would be asking you what are the different types of assessment, isa pong pwede kong gawin is like this. Sana yung clear? Okay, so clear. So for example, class, susulat ako dito, types of assessment. And then magko-concept mapping tayo. Okay, students, there are different types of assessment. Can somebody write what's the first type of assessment? Can you please write it down on the screen? Okay? Yung problema, napakalaki naman kasi ng sulat kamay nyo. Okay? So for example, formative assessment. Sinusulat niya formative assessment. Okay? Can others type what other types of assessment yung pumapasok sa isip nila? Okay? Give me other examples of assessment that comes into your mind. Okay? You have your authentic. Yes, very good on that. Another type of assessment po na pwede po natin gamitin. Okay? Yes, somebody type authentic assessment. I appreciate that you use the typing. Okay? And then, sinusubukan niya pong sumulat ng summative assessment, pero parang clouds yung kinalalabasan dito sa akin. Okay? So class, if you can see, no, may mga ganong options tayo. Now, I'm trying to explore. Wait lang ha, I might have missed something. Okay? This is also a reminder for us. No? This is also a reminder for us that when you are using technology, you need to be able to practice it also. So hindi pa pwede class na gagamitin mo yung technology sa mga klase mo, tapos first time mo din siyang gawin. Okay? Halimbawa sa akin, I have been doing this actually for a long time already, but as you can see, there are some times na parang hindi mo mamamaster kung anong nangyari. So, one thing class for you to avoid that is for you to dry run. Ha? Dapat mag-dry run ka or mag-pilot study ka. Kaya mag-pilot run ka para na hindi ka mapalya during your live class. Okay? Now, if you would look at the screen, guys, no, let's try to annotate. Okay? Can you annotate? Okay, class, can you see the option annotate on your screen? Nakikita nyo ba? Can you give me a feedback? Okay? Now, class, try to encircle the femur. Can somebody try to encircle where the femur is? Okay? Yan, class. That's one way for you to assess the learning of your students. Okay? So, it's actually a simple application of your Zoom, but that's one way for you to assess your students. Sir, paano pag face-to-face? Pag face-to-face, siguro kapag nasa paaralan kang mahina pang budget, may mga chart ka. Okay? However, class, pag nasa private schools, class, for example, no, or kapag okay yung budget ng paaralan, siguro may mga skeleton models ka. So you can ask the students to go in front and then do the pointing of your femur. Okay? So you can do things like that here in Zoom. That's why, guys, if you are using Zoom later on in teaching, if you will be using platforms like this, hindi pa ako nag-i-endorso ng Zoom, pero try to use its other features. Okay? If you can notice, I'm not only using the PowerPoint option of your Zoom, I'm actually using it to write down what I want. Okay, kasi class, pag nasa Google Meet ako, I'm limited on the writing. Mas gusto ko kasing sumusulat ako. Okay? So maraming purposes yan at maraming features yan. And we are reminded that you innovate on the assessment task that you do. Hindi pa pwede na palagi na lang tayong test. Hindi pa pwede class na palagi na lang tayong daldal. What do we mean class by scaffolding? You need to guide your students. No? Basically class, when you talk about scaffolding is guiding your students. Halimbawa class, no, you would be having, anong tawag natin dyan? You would be having an experiment. When you're having the experiment, you first demonstrate to the students as to how to do it. And then later on, class, you allow them to demonstrate it by themselves. That is scaffolding. Or, halimbawa, if there is a complicated literary writing that you would want them to interpret. Halimbawa, class, gusto mo silang ipa-interpret ng desiderata. Kaya gusto mo silang mag-interpret ng desiderata. Tapos yung introduction pala ng desiderata. Go placidly amidst the noise and the haze. Okay? Tapos yung mga students mo parang first time pa lang itong gawin. So anong gagawin mo? You interpret the first lines to them. Okay? You interpret the first lines to them so that they will know na, ganun pala yung gusto ni Ma'am. Or ganito pala mag-interpret ng desiderata. Okay? So class, that is scaffolding. So when we talk about scaffolding, it is a method wherein you support the students so that they will be able to learn and develop a new skill. Para halimbawa, pag swimming yung tinuturo natin, di ba class, hindi nyo naman sinasabi sa swimming na, okay, day 1, students perform butterfly. Okay? Hindi naman tayo ganon, di ba? So kadalasan day 1, anong ginagawa ni teacher? Magbabubbling muna, tapos floating, bago natin ipo-progress towards the more advanced na mga, anong tawag mo dyan, swimming movements. Okay? So ganon din class, no? That is referred to as scaffolding. So class, the keyword for scaffolding is that you offer something to support the students for them class to learn and develop a skill. Okay, you offer something for the students to learn and develop this. Okay? Any questions so far that you have in mind? Sige.